Hi, Lynn.
And hi, I'm Terry.
We are going to talk today about kind of just a general overview about FirstWatch. One way that I kind of simplify and like to think of FirstWatch is that we're like a smoke detector, just hanging out in the background, waiting for something to happen that you need to be alerted of. And when that happens, whether it's a geocluster of events, whether it's a trend or a pattern, then we can send out an alert to you. Um, to whoever you want that alert to go out to so that you know what's happening in your agency basically as it's happening, and it increases your situational awareness. Today we have Terry Fitch, our Director of Sales. Terry, what's your title?
Director of Sales.
Okay, awesome. I got it right.
It was
So
perfect.
Terry's going to walk us through what basically what the FirstWatch dashboard looks like and kind of just a general overview about FirstWatch. Terry?
Perfect. Thanks, Car. The As you're able to see my screen, uh, you're actually looking at my workspace. Now, when you log in with your ID and your password into your FirstWatch system, you'll have your own view and your own capabilities of what you're allowed to look at and be able to monitor. Now, when I say the word allowed, that's a word that I'm using on purpose because it's what you subscribe to within the system. And it's important to know that you are subscribed into different capabilities of the system of what kind of data you're able to monitor, and that can be identified data or HIPAA regulated, which means it's de-identified data, and it randomly can move the information around. But that's the different capabilities and the different ways that you're able to see the information based on your login and again your ID. Now, on these different capabilities I was talking about, you have a lot of different views into dashboards in the system. So dashboards meaning these are tabs across the top, and these different dashboards allow you to see data in a different way. For example, I'm looking at my fire operations tab right now across the top. So you'll see I have a lot of different views in here. We'll cover a couple of those quickly. But in the operations one, I'm looking at, for example, this is this gauge is a trigger. So what we're looking at is we're looking at a customer out in Orlando, Florida, where they're looking at their EMS turnout times out of the station in 60 seconds or less. Now these numbers are real. It's hard to believe that they can get out of that station in 60 seconds, 96% of the time, but these are accurate numbers. Now we are looking at year to date, and when we're looking at numbers and looking at monitoring performance, we can look at those in different ways. We can look at them currently today. So from 7 a.m. Eastern time, they're at a 97% compliance. If I want to look at it month to date, I can see that right now they're at 95% compliant on getting out of that station in 60 seconds or less on all their EMS calls. So when it's looking at performance-based criteria, that's where you have the ability to break it down into different segments like current, month to date, and year to date. And you look across the top row here, you'll see places where they're looking at differently. Like this is a fire department looking at effective fire force. So they want to know when the 17th firefighter gets on scene to all structure residentials in 10 minutes and 30 seconds or less. Down below, this is other areas looking at things like this is monitoring for pediatric cardiac arrest, and they want to know if something is happening that they need to be alerted about. So that's another important factor about these triggers is that they will automatically, like Carlin said, it's a smoke detector in the background. So when it detects something that's going on or a threshold is exceeded or broken, it will send alerts out in the background that you're not even aware of until all of a sudden your phone goes off or you get an email that says, hey, this situation has now happened. Now, as we're talking about some of these gauges or these triggers, now remember what a trigger is it's the data criteria that is filtered and it has an outcome to it. So that's what a trigger is in this case. So on the 60-second EMS turnout times, when I click on that trigger itself, it takes me back behind to live reporting capabilities. So for example, you'll see here, remember I was saying that they started at 7 a.m. Eastern time. So since 7, it's now 11 a.m. their time. They've had 93 calls, and 91 of those calls have been out of the station in 60 seconds or less. You can look at this data through Fractile or any other kinds of means that you want to look at it. But let's go to the events tab. So there's a group of information above here inside the trigger as well. So we're going to look at the events first. Let's just take a quick tour of this. Now, again, please remember we're in the turnout time for this customer. Now, I can export this data out to Excel. So what that means is I can take all this information that I have loaded in here right now, click the Excel button, and it will export all that data automatically into Excel, where I can create my pivot tables, I can manipulate the data however I want to look at that information. I can also export this data out to a KML file. That allows me to plot all of these calls or this information over the top of the Google Earth maps. That way you're able to use their application. We put our data on top of it, so you're able to still drill down into the call factors there as well. The little globe over here to the right allows you to link this system to, or this trigger to like a monitor inside the communication center, something like that, where you can be watching this data all the time as calls are coming in and changing. Now down below, you'll see we have where the calls are actually sitting. So you see it's geo-validated. If there was a patient care report that was associated with this call, they could click it there, because something that's important about FirstWatch is we can aggregate the data from multiple data sources into a single combo trigger. So that way you can look at the information from one location. Just going across the top, these columns will be defined for your agency as we're creating those. So you can see this one has quite a bit of information. It has employees' names, badge numbers, was it in or outside of the standard? Remember, this is that 60-second standard. And what shift were they on, A, B, or C? What battalion were they in? And I'll show you why this makes important sense here in just a couple of minutes. But if I click on this hyperlink that says report number, this is where you can easily get into the data, and you'll notice I'm de-identified like I talked about for HIPAA. But you can pull all the call data up from right here and be able to look at it from one location, one spot. So that way you're not having to go out. Now let's continue this tour quickly here, and let's look at something where we have our data that falls into ArcGIS. Now this is loaded into every trigger, so we include GIS capabilities and all the different triggers and data that we have. But again, just like I was talking about with the KML file, if I click on that icon, I can actually pull the call record up from right here inside the map. Over here on the right hand side, we'll bring in all of your polygons or your layers that you may have, or we'll put in whatever layers we have. But for example, if I wanted to be able to look at the concentration of where these types of calls are located, I can hit my heat map and actually identify a little bit more of the higher concentrated areas that are having the calls. Continuing on, so that's just a couple of the different features in maps. Destination allows you to see where all the patients were transported to, but something that's even more important is individual performance. Now, what this means is we're able to go down to the apparatus level or the personnel level within this trigger. So I want to be able to look at not only did they get out of the station in 60 seconds, but who was it? It was engine 28, or it was engine 30 who has ran 3 calls, and out of those 3 calls, they have been out of the station in 60 seconds or less 100% of the time. Month to date, they've had 173 calls. 7 of those have only been over the threshold, and last 30 days and year to date and so on. The other important thing about a trigger is the ability to look at data retrospectively. I want to be able to go back in time. I want to look at the last 3 months worth of these calls that have been out of chute in the 60 seconds or less. I want to look at all that information. Again, I can just pick my date range, hit the event list, and bring that information up. So that gives you a quick tour of what a trigger is and how a trigger operates. Again, let's talk a little bit about some of your dashboards and what you're able to look at. So I'm looking at my operations tab right now, which we talked about a minute ago. But let's say I want to go and look at specifically patient care reporting capabilities. This is my clinical EPCR dashboard, and I have specifically looked for different triggers that I want to look at that's monitoring for different information. For example, I want to watch for all of my patient care reports that are missing vital information. They're missing the mandatory fields. Maybe it didn't get a social security number or a date of birth, something like that. I'm able to look at that kind of information all from my triggers in here. And remember, just like we did in the operations one, I can drill into every single one of these triggers and be able to go behind it to the live reports. Now, another view, sorry, I lost my way there for a second. Another view to be able to go look at is I built a public health tab. Now, this is a different view. I have a map in here, as well as I have the triggers that are associated to the map. For example, if I want to watch for opiates overdoses, I want to look at heroin overdoses or marijuana or whatever the case may be, I can create triggers and have them monitored, and it'll put it on the map as the calls are happening. This one happens to be looking at frequent flyers or frequent patients that are going through the system. Now, what that means is we're looking for patients that have been picked up multiple times within a specific amount of time, like maybe 6 months or a year or something like that. We want to see if we've been to this individual multiple times. So we're able to actually monitor for that. This is looking at COVID clusters. So this is monitoring that if you have a threshold of, let's say, 3 COVID cases within a half a mile apart, this can actually monitor that and look for trends and patterns and let you know in advance that you have something going on. That's how we monitor for heroin overdoses and that sort of thing when you have a bad dealer on the street that's pushing dope that's causing these kind of issues. The other thing about tabs, real quickly, is we're able to look at this information and monitor it, report in real time as well from a tab. For example, I'm going to open up my live workload report, and this is where I can just click on a tab and it'll go through, it'll pull all the data, and it'll look at the information as it's coming across in the system. So this is just another way of being able to see information in real time. Now let's pull out of these tabs for a quick second here, and let's talk about some other capabilities in the system. So if we have capabilities such as you want to look at clinical performance, quality improvement, you want to be able to look at fire operations and accreditation, these different kinds of capabilities are considered to be bolt-on modules to the FirstWatch system. For example, FirstPass, which is the clinical quality improvement module, allows you to go in and be able to monitor data from this capability of the module itself and be able to see how the performance was within the system. Another capability is called FOAM. That's Fire Operations and Accreditation Module. This is a landing page now of being able to watch your performance-based standards that you're doing within your system, everything from alarm processing time to your effective response force down at the bottom here. All of this information is capable of being drilled down into the level all the way down to the report itself. And then finally, we have another dashboard that's called IDV. And what that stands for is Interactive Data Visualization. Again, this capability allows you as a user to define and create dashboards the way you want to look at them and the data the way you want to see them and when you want to see it. It drills down and goes into different kinds of capabilities all the way down into the filtering of how you want to look at that outcome and that data. Because remember, inside of the triggers themselves, these are filtered, but you can continue to filter it down. But again, and then lastly, these are just all the different capabilities of the system that you can use in those different modules. Academy Analytics, being able to monitor, the performance of your communication center to see how they're doing during the process of call interrogation or call taker performance, that sort of thing as well. And I think that covers kind of like from a high level overview, Carlin.
Yeah, Terry, would you mind showing us the trigger assessment tool or TAT?
That's a great point. So let's go back to this turnout time, this EMS turnout time trigger. You'll see this little bullseye up here in the top left corner of the trigger itself. If I click that, actually, let me describe what it is first just a little bit. So if a unit exceeds a threshold, whatever that threshold is that we predefine, we can automatically create this little report that will email out to a specific person or to just a location. Like in this case, it may go to a fire station where they exceeded the threshold and they need to go in and now fill out a report. It's a way to help understand the inefficiencies or where you're not being effective right now inside your system. So this would go to the lieutenant or the battalion chief, where they would just fill out what happened with that call. Now, when they go down, so what an outcome, that was the report itself. What the outcome will look like is more when it comes back into your email box, it'll let you see the results of what they filled out. For example, this will just tell you this was 11:51 from Quarters to Gardner. They were downgraded by the first responders and the times are correct. So it just allows you to find out what really happened as you're trying to dissect the system a little bit. And again, that's called the trigger assessment tool, or a threat assessment tool, either way, however you want to look at TAPT. That's their
Perfect.
acronym, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Terry. That was such a good overview. I love that you pointed out that FirstWatch has the ability to aggregate different data sources. So if you have CAD, ProQA, um, EPCR, FirstWatch can take all of that data, aggregate it, put it all together, feed it back out to you in a way that's meaningful and is easy to understand. So what a great overview. Thanks, Terry.
Sounds perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, we're happy that you spent some time with us today and hope that the rest of your day is really good. Thanks so much.
Appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye.